Hi, I'm Anna, and welcome to BC Stories. Today's story is about a woman who built everything she had with her own two hands, and the one thing she couldn't build was a door she was willing to leave open. Before I go on, let me know where you're watching from. It means so much to see how far these stories reach. Now, let me tell you about Zara. Zara Pierce didn't do small talk on the job. She showed up, assessed, fixed, and left. That was the system. 6 years running her own one-woman electrical business in Atlanta, and not once had the system failed her. She had a routine. Van loaded by 6 a.m., first job by 7. Music off while she drove. She liked the quiet, liked the way her brain organized the day in silence. Every client got the same version of her. Polite, efficient, gone before the coffee they offered had time to cool. It wasn't that she was cold, she just didn't see the point in being warm when warm didn't pay invoices. The call came through her booking system: garage light, residential, Buckhead address. Her assistant, well, her scheduling app, confirmed it automatically. She didn't look up the client. Didn't need to. When Marcus Dunn opened the door, she didn't recognize him. Didn't know he'd spent 8 years in the NFL before a knee injury ended his career at 29. Didn't know he'd turned a settlement check into a real estate development company that now had his name on 4 buildings across the city. She saw a tall man in a gray t-shirt who stepped aside without hovering and said, "Garage is through there." Good. She liked the ones who got out of the way. The issue was simple: corroded wiring on a junction box feeding the overhead fixture. 20 minutes, maybe less. She worked clean, worked fast, and didn't look up once. Marcus made coffee in the kitchen. She could hear the machine from the garage. He didn't bring her a cup, didn't ask if she wanted one. He just existed in the next room, and somehow that was more noticeable than if he'd been standing over her shoulder asking questions. She was writing up the invoice when he appeared in the doorway, leaned against the frame, not blocking her path. She noticed that. He wasn't in her way. He was just present. And then he said it. Calm, almost casual, like he'd been thinking it for 20 minutes and just couldn't hold it in anymore. "You're beautiful. You know that." Not a line, not a setup, not the kind of thing men usually said to women holding voltage testers in their garages. Just a man saying something true out loud, like the words had their own weight and he was tired of carrying them. Zara didn't blush. She didn't smile either. She looked at him, steady, unbothered, completely in control, and said, "That'll be $145. He laughed. A real one, not performed. She almost did too. Almost. She took the check, walked to her van, and drove away. And that, in Zara's mind, was supposed to be the end of it. Now, here's where I want to pause for a second, because there's something happening in this moment that's worth understanding. Psychologists have a term for what Zara was doing. It's called defensive autonomy. A pattern where a person builds such a strong sense of self-reliance that it becomes a wall, not just a foundation. And here's the tricky part. It usually starts as survival. It starts because at some point, depending on someone else cost you something real. So you learn to stop depending. You learn to stop letting people close enough to matter. And it works for a while. It works beautifully. You become competent, independent, respected. But somewhere along the way, the thing that saved you becomes the thing that isolates you. And you can't always tell the difference between protecting yourself and punishing yourself for wanting connection. Zara didn't know she was doing this. Most people don't. That's what makes it so effective and so expensive. 3 days passed. Zara had done 4 jobs since Marcus Dunn's garage and hadn't thought about him once. That's what she told herself, and honestly, she almost believed it. Then her business line rang. She picked up expecting a new booking. Instead, she heard his voice, and what he said wasn't what she expected. He didn't flirt. He didn't ask her out. He apologized, said he'd been thinking about it and realized what he said wasn't professional, said it wasn't fair to put that on someone who was there to do a job, said he just wanted to clear the air, and if she felt uncomfortable, he understood. Then he said, "That's all. I just didn't want to be the kind of man who says something like that and doesn't think about how it lands," and hung up. Zara stood in her kitchen holding the phone for a long time after the call ended, not because of what he said, because of what he did. See, Zara grew up watching her father get talked down to on job sites by men who knew less than him, but looked more like what people expected a contractor to look like. She watched him swallow it every time. She was 14 the first time a man on a job site told her she was too pretty to be doing electrical work, and she remembered the exact expression on her father's face when she told him about it. Not anger, resignation, like he'd been expecting it. She swore she'd never shrink herself to make anyone comfortable, built her whole business on that promise. Her van had her name on it in bold letters. She mentored young women trying to break into trades through a weekend program she ran at a community center on the South Side. And she guarded her reputation the way other people guard their savings, because for her, they were the same thing. No man had ever circled back to consider how his words landed on her, not once, and she didn't know what to do with that. She called him back, told herself it was just to acknowledge the apology. The call lasted 40 minutes. He was funny. Not the rehearsed kind, the kind that slips out sideways when someone's actually paying attention. He asked about her work. Not, "So what's it like being a female electrician?" He asked about load calculations and panel upgrades and whether she preferred residential or commercial, like her job was as real as his, because it was. And somewhere in that conversation, Zara made a choice she hadn't made in years. She stayed on the line longer than she needed to. That was the door opening. She just didn't know it yet. What she learned over the next few weeks was that Marcus Dunn's world looked nothing like hers. Galas, investor dinners, people who wanted something from him before they even shook his hand. He'd learned to read rooms fast and people faster. He told her once that the loneliest part of success wasn't the hours. It was realizing that most people in your life were auditioning, not connecting. And then he said something that stayed with her. "You're the first person in a long time who didn't perform for me. You just showed up, fully. And it's the most disarming thing I've ever seen." She didn't say it back, but she felt it. That terrifying recognition when someone sees the version of you that you didn't put on display. What Zara didn't know yet was that Marcus carried his own wound. Before the development company, before the money, there was a relationship that taught him what it felt like to be flattened into an image. An ex who loved the athlete, not the man, who stayed for the lifestyle and left when the knee brace replaced the jersey. He never talked about it publicly, but it shaped everything. The way he moved through rooms, the way he tested people's motives before letting them close, and the way he recognized Zara's armor immediately, because he'd worn the same kind. They didn't announce anything, didn't need to. Someone saw her van parked outside his building, someone else saw them at a restaurant in Midtown, and just like that, the narrative was written for them. Blog posts questioned whether Zara's recent business growth was really her own. A rival contractor mentioned to a client that she seemed distracted lately. Old colleagues started whispering, and then came the photo, her leaving Marcus's building, posted with the caption, "Found her marketing strategy." And here's what hurt the most. It didn't touch Marcus, not even a little. His world absorbed it like background noise. It landed entirely on Zara because she had spent years making sure no one could say her success wasn't earned. Every license, every certification, every 5-star review was a brick in the wall of proof that she belonged in rooms people didn't expect to find her in. And now, with one relationship, all of it was being reframed as something she'd been given instead of something she'd built. And here's where Zara made the decision that nearly cost her everything. She didn't fight back. She didn't confront the posts. She did something worse. She went quiet. Not publicly, privately. She stopped returning Marcus's calls, canceled plans with a one-line text, threw herself into work with an intensity that looked like focus, but was really fear wearing a hard hat. She wasn't leaving him because she didn't care. She was cutting away the one thing people could use against her. And she did it the way she did everything, cleanly, efficiently, without asking anyone's permission. Now, here's the contradiction, and this is important. Zara had spent years mentoring young women, telling them to take up space, telling them never to shrink to make someone else comfortable, never to let the world's discomfort dictate their choices. And the moment her space got uncomfortable, she did exactly what she told them never to do. She made herself smaller to manage perception. That's the thing about armor. You build it to protect who you are, but if you're not careful, you forget that the person inside it needs air too. And then the thing she was afraid of actually happened, but not the way she expected. Jada, 19 years old, the sharpest kid in Zara's mentorship program, and the one Zara saw the most of herself in. Jada stopped showing up to sessions. Zara tracked her down, found out the truth. Jada's mother had pulled her from the program. She'd seen the blog posts, seen the photo, told her daughter it looked bad to be associated with that. Jada wouldn't even look Zara in the eye. She just said quietly, "My mom thinks it looks bad." That broke something in Zara that the blog posts couldn't touch, because this wasn't about her pride anymore. This wasn't about her reputation or her feelings or her fear of being seen as less than. This was about a 19-year-old girl with a gift and a future, and the noise from Zara's life was reaching into that girl's life and dimming her light. Zara drove home that night and sat in her van in the driveway for almost an hour. Engine off, hands on the wheel. Marcus didn't call again. He showed up. Not at her house, at her job site, middle of the afternoon. She was elbow deep in a commercial panel when she heard his voice behind her. He didn't confront her, didn't demand answers. He just handed her a coffee, black, no sugar, the way she'd mentioned once in passing weeks ago, and said, "You don't have to explain, but don't disappear on me. I've had enough people do that." She didn't answer right away. She finished the connection she was working on, put her tools down, took the coffee, and then she said the thing she'd been afraid to say out loud. "They're coming after the program, Marcus. A girl I mentor, her mother pulled her out because of us, because of the posts. I can handle them talking about me. I can't handle it reaching her." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "So what do you want to do?" Not, "Let me fix it," not, "I'll handle it," just, "What do you want to do?" And Zara realized something in that moment, something she hadn't let herself consider. Marcus wasn't the problem. He had never been the problem. The problem was that she had spent so long being the only person she could count on that she'd confused partnership with dependency. She thought letting someone stand beside her meant she couldn't stand on her own. And that was a lie she'd been telling herself for years without ever questioning it. Zara went to Jada's mother's house. She didn't call first, didn't send a message. She showed up, sat at that woman's kitchen table, looked her in the eye, and said, "I understand why you pulled her. I'm not here to argue with you about it. But your daughter has something special. She's smart, she's careful, and she's already better with a panel than people twice her age. I'm not going to let what people say about my personal life be the reason she doesn't use her gift." Jada's mother didn't answer right away. She poured 2 glasses of water, set one in front of Zara, and finally said, "You really believe in her like that? I wouldn't be sitting at your table if I didn't." Jada came back the next week. They didn't do a press tour. didn't issue statements, didn't clap back at the noise. Zara just kept showing up. To jobs, to the mentorship sessions, to her community, to him. And eventually, the work did what work always does when you let it. It spoke louder. Months later, they opened a shared space. One side was Zara's electrical training workshop for young women in the trades. The other was a community development hub Marcus funded, but she ran. The sign on the door read, Pierce and Dunn. Her name first. He insisted on it. But the moment I keep coming back to happened the night before the opening. The space was empty. No one else was there. Zara was alone, running her hand along the wall she'd helped wire herself. She stopped at a light switch near the entrance and tightened the faceplate. Old habit. She couldn't help it. Marcus walked in, found her there in the half-dark. The only light came from a single fixture she'd installed that afternoon. Warm, golden, casting soft shadows across the empty workshop floor. He didn't say anything at first, just leaned against the doorframe and watched her, the same way he'd watched her that first day in his garage. Quiet, present, like she was the only thing in the room worth paying attention to. She looked up. You're early. The opening's tomorrow. He walked toward her, slow, not rushing, like he understood that with Zara, you didn't chase, you just showed up and stayed steady until she decided you were safe. I know, he said. I just didn't want you to be in here alone tonight. She looked away, tried to busy herself with the faceplate again, but her hands had stopped moving. He was close now, close enough that she could smell his cologne, mixed with the faint scent of paint on his jacket. He hadn't even changed. He reached out and took the screwdriver from her hand, set it down gently on the workbench, and then he did something no one ever did with Zara. He waited, didn't pull her in, didn't make a move, just stood there, a breath away, giving her the space to decide. And she looked up at him, really looked, and for once she didn't calculate, didn't measure the risk, didn't think about what it meant or what it could cost. She just stayed. He brought his hand to her face, slow, tucked a loose braid behind her ear. His thumb traced her jawline like he was memorizing it, like he was trying to understand how something could be this strong and this soft at the same time. And then, quietly, almost like he was telling a secret, he said, You know what got me? That first day in the garage. It wasn't how you looked, it was how you moved. Like the whole world could fall apart around you and you'd still know exactly what to do with your hands. He paused. His forehead touched hers. And then I got to know you, and I realized you're not just steady on the outside, Zara. You're steady all the way through. And I have never, in my life, met anyone who made me feel safe just by being in the room. Her breath caught. Not dramatically, just a small hitch, the kind only he would notice, because he was close enough to feel it. I don't need you to be soft for me, he whispered. I just need you to stop leaving the room when it gets warm. She laughed, a small one, wet around the edges. I'm here, aren't I? Yeah, you are. And then she kissed him, not the other way around. Zara, she closed the distance. Her hands, the same hands that wired panels and gripped voltage testers and built a business from nothing, those hands came up to the sides of his face, and she kissed him like she was done being afraid of what happened when she let herself want something she couldn't build alone. It was slow. It was quiet. It was the kind of kiss that doesn't need music behind it, because the silence is already doing enough. When they pulled apart, he kept his eyes closed a little while longer than she did, like he wanted to hold it a little while more. She smiled, a real one, not the almost smile from the garage, not the professional courtesy she gave clients, the real one, the one that had been behind the armor this whole time, waiting for someone patient enough to still be standing when she finally let it out. He picked up the pliers from the workbench, looked at her like he was just some guy who wanted to be useful. "So, you gonna teach me how to wire a switch or what?" She laughed, full this time, warm, the kind that fills an empty room, and took his hand, positioned it on the wire, and showed him what to do. And I think that's the thing about love that nobody tells you. It's not about someone rescuing you. It's not about fireworks or fairy tales or someone completing your sentences. Sometimes it's just someone picking up a pair of pliers and saying, "Teach me your world," and meaning it. On opening night, a reporter asked Marcus what it was like being with a woman who didn't need him. He smiled, easy, unhurried, and said, "She doesn't need me. She chose me. That's better." The camera would have found Zara across the room if this were a movie, but it wasn't a movie. It was just a Tuesday night in Atlanta, in a building that smelled like fresh paint and possibility. And Zara wasn't looking at Marcus. She was watching Jada across the room, showing a new student how to hold a wire stripper, teaching her which way to turn it, being patient the way someone had once been patient with her. Zara smiled, small, private, earned. So that was the story of Zara Pierce. And what really stuck with me isn't the love story, it's the question underneath it. How many of us have built walls that started as protection and became prisons? How many of us have gotten so good at being strong alone that we forgot strength can also look like letting someone hand you a coffee on a bad day? There's this idea in psychology called self-reliance as identity fusion, when your independence becomes so central to who you are that any threat to it feels like a threat to your entire self. And the cruel irony is that the more competent you become, the harder it is to let anyone in, because you've proven you don't have to. And that proof becomes its own kind of cage. Zara didn't need Marcus to save her. She didn't need anyone. That was never the question. The question was whether she could let someone stand next to her without believing it erased everything she'd built on her own. And I think a lot of us are living some version of that question right now. Maybe not with romance, maybe with friendship, maybe with family, maybe with just the basic act of asking for help when you've spent years proving you don't need it. Independence is beautiful, but isolation dressed up as independence, that'll cost you things you didn't even know you wanted. I wanted to share this story because I think we need more conversations about the difference between those two things. They look almost identical from the outside, but one of them builds a life, and the other one just builds a wall. If this one sat with you, hit that like button. It truly helps the channel grow. And if you enjoy stories that make you pause and think a little longer than you expected to, consider subscribing. I'm Anna, this is BC Stories, and I'll see you in the next one.